Chapter 65. The last few days of school before the winter break were approaching, and we were eager to be with the rest of the family. Home was now in Thinganjun, a suburb of Rangoon, where my mother had rented a house and where, incidentally, Kins had a hideout around 1940. We had been back to Thinganjun once before during the summer holidays and had found it to be interesting and very different, with paddy fields all around and not a hill in sight. We hadn't heard from home for a while and were getting homesick, so when Umaunji, my father's friend and business associate, whom we called Uncle, came to visit us at the convent, we persuaded him to tell the nuns that our mother had requested him to send us home on the train. I think he was as surprised as we were when Mother Superior believed him. She also said that there was a reliable and responsible officer of the railways, U Tin Hla, who was going to be taking his daughters, Violet and Marcy, back for the holidays in a few days, and that we could accompany them up to Tazi. She reassured Umaunji that the gentleman, because of his position in the railways, could arrange for a special carriage for us from Tazi and on to Rangoon. We were quite happy with this arrangement, because U Tin Hla's daughters, who looked like twins and were about the same age as my younger sister Bilkis, were also her friends. We excitedly packed our things in 3 of the same black metal trunks that had carried some of our things when we returned from Bombay and got ready to leave the next day. As we arrived at the train station, the rooster's raucous cry splintered the serenity of dying night, and the growing brightness of dawn stripped the chiffon shrouds that draped the mountains edged by a ribbon stream. Neatly tucked into this tapestry, the railway station sat, its angled roof cross-stitched in red to shade from sun and rain. And here the train would come with its rocking, rolling swing and drumbeat, the hiss of its steam engine cut in two by its sharp, shrill whistle. We boarded the private carriage of Violet and Marcy's father, U Tin Hla, and as the train pulled out of the station, we stood at the open windows looking out at the trees and bushes slowly moving past us. The train had not picked up much speed, and it rumbled over the tracks that lay above the stream, its chug-chugging echoing loudly in the gorge below as it went over the bridge. Just as it swung around the hill close to the convent, we were pleasantly surprised to see the boys from our school standing on the hillside close to the tracks. They called out to us and waved us farewell. U Tin Hla turned out to be a kind and jolly person, and he pampered us all the way to Tazi. Their house, where we spent the night, was enormous and made entirely of either teak or pingodo. It was spacious, yet felt strangely empty, the large rooms hollow, as if lacking a presence. Before we went to sleep in the large beds, encased in mosquito nets, U Tin Hla put his arms around his daughters and, speaking fondly of his wife, told us that she had gone on to another existence. He brought out an album and showed us a picture of her. He also gave us a photograph of her and another one showing him sitting on the steps of their previous home with his daughters. Early the next morning, U Tin Hla took us to the station and put us on board the train in a first-class carriage that we had entirely to ourselves all the way to Rangoon. I watched the sun rise over the green paddy fields, dotted here and there with a few coconut palms, extending unimpeded all the way to the horizon. It is early enough for the sun's rays to catch the dewdrops and turn them into sparkling diamonds to my myopic eyes, and I am inspired to write. Miracles surround me. The dewdrops seem to gain the texture of pure diamonds as the sun shines on the plain. And I am there again, on that train, as the day draws to a close quickly. The twilight is short. The silhouette of palm trees, black now against the pink glow of sky. My sisters fall asleep on the sleeping berths, one above the other, but I stay up, sitting on the bench, writing in my notebook at the table. The train pulls into a small station and stops. I suddenly hear our carriage door open, and a young boy enters. He seems to be about my age or just a little bit older. He comes in and says, "Hello," and seats himself opposite me on the other side of the table. He has an air of confidence and maturity about him, unusual among boys of his age that I know. From his features, he appears to be Anglo-Indian or Anglo-Burmese. He is not very tall, a bit on the stocky side, has sun-tanned skin, dark brown hair, and green eyes. We start talking, and he tells me that his father works for the railway and that he has free passage on the train any time he wants. The light grows dim. He pulls out a candle from his pocket and lights it with a match, then lets a few drops of melted wax fall onto the middle of the table and fixes the candle on it. The candlelight glows and flickers on his face. We talk with the ease of those who have known each other for a long time. Several hours pass, and it is quite late at night when we arrive at Taungu, where he says goodbye and disembarks. We hadn't exchanged names or addresses, and I never saw him again, but I sometimes wonder if he was an apparition that appeared to keep me company for part of that journey. Fast forward to 1959. A few years later, unaware of the hostile political split within government and the concomitant unleashing of vindictive forces, I traveled once more on that train from Kalor to Rangoon. I had recently married a boy from Rangoon, and my husband and I found ourselves booked into a carriage which epitomized for me the absurd paradox of my homeland. On an earlier scheduled trip made by that train, the passengers had been brutally massacred, and the seats and floor of the compartment were still stained and splattered with their blood. It was difficult to imagine that my sisters and I had traveled on that same train 9 years earlier. Chapter 67, Thinganjun. We arrived at the Thinganjun railway station early in the afternoon. Neither the nuns nor Umaunji had as yet been able to inform our mother about our return, and we were not expected, so there was no one at the station to meet us. Undeterred, my sister Dolly and I recruited 3 coolies to carry our luggage, and with each of them carrying a large trunk on their heads, we walked to the house that we had come home to the previous summer. It wasn't very far from the railway station, and it didn't take us more than 20 minutes to arrive home. The land was flat and quite easy for us who were accustomed to maneuvering the hills of Kalor. Farouk and Salim were playing outside the house in the paddy fields, which had by now been harvested, the wide open spaces becoming natural playgrounds during the dry season. They shouted out with joy upon seeing us and rushed home to announce our arrival. We were delighted to be back again with our mother and the rest of our siblings, and even more pleased when we were told that we could attend the private Burmese school next door instead of having to go back to the convent in Kalor. Thinganjun was built on the alluvial delta plain of the Irrawaddy, with bamboo groves and deep sandy soil in those areas not occupied by paddy fields. The house we had rented was a large 2-story building, of which we occupied the lower floor. There were several rooms and several bathrooms, which stood in a row on one side of the open corridor to the kitchen. The grounds behind the house extended more than 100 yards and contained a deep well, and the water had to be pumped up before the taps in the house would run. There were many trees which were tall, and their branches extended shade over the grounds, creating enough shade to make the afternoons of the hot, dry season pleasantly cool. Occasionally, I would hear the raspy cawing of a crow that had perched on one of the upper branches of the many trees in the yard behind the house. The rainy season had ended a few months earlier, and the light breezes that rustled through failed to brush away the fine layer of dust which had settled on the glossy surface of the leaves. The paddy fields which stretched beyond the dirt road in front of the house were varying shades of brown with penciled-in markings of light gold where stubby rice stalks stuck up out of the dry, cracked earth. A quiet settled over the land, as if hushed and waiting for the downpour of the monsoons, when the din of croaking frogs would rattle the air and the fields would turn into large ponds of water for us to paddle in. It was only after leaving Kalor and living for a while in Thinganjan that I finally began to learn about the culture and traditions of the majority of people of Burma and made friends with Burmese children who spoke no English or Urdu, the two languages I had been most familiar with till then. While playing rounders and other games in the paddy fields with Tin Shui, Hla Shui, and other children, we began to understand and speak a little Burmese. We briefly attended the private Burmese school next door and happened to still be students there when a poetry elocution contest was announced. Unfortunately, the poem was in English, which the majority of students at the school found very difficult. Unfairly for those students, my brother Farouk and myself were also required to enter the contest. Needless to say, I won the first prize and was given a small globe with a world neatly mapped out on its surface, and my brother Farouk won the second prize. I have never recovered from the guilt of that victory and the strange prognostication of a prize that symbolically gave me the world, yet ironically, when I wanted to and could, was disallowed from fulfilling the promise that I had recited with so much passion. The poem was the one by Sir Cecil Spring Rice. I vow to thee, my country, all earthly things above, entire and whole and perfect, the service of my love. The love that asks no question, the love that stands the test, that lays upon the altar the dearest and the best. The love that never falters, the love that pays the price, the love that makes undaunted the final sacrifice. I heard my country calling away across the sea, across the waste of waters. She calls and calls to me. Her sword is girded at her side, her helmet on her head, and around her feet are lying the dying and the dead. I hear the noise of battle, the thunder of her guns. I haste to thee, my mother, a son among thy sons. And there's another country I've heard of long ago, most dear to them that love her, most great to them that know. We may not count her armies, we may not see her king. Her fortress is a faithful heart, her pride is suffering. And soul by soul, and silently, her shining bounds increase, and her ways are ways of gentleness, and all her paths are peace.